Good afternoon, Facebook and community family. Welcome to our third Facebook Live event. And again, on a very, very important topic that we've talked about quite a bit, but there's so much work to be done on education as it relates to the vaccine. Today, we're going to continue to educate one another, sharing important facts and information about the COVID vaccine, where you can access the vaccine, and also, I'm sure is on many people's mind, once you've gotten the vaccine, what you can expect. My name is Arnulfo de la Cruz, a very proud Executive Vice President of SEIU Local 2015. And I'm also joined by my sister, who's no stranger to you all, Executive Vice President Kim Evon, as well as an expert, Dr. Alicia Fernandez, and our very own Executive Board member and caregiver, Ms. Javetta Gregory. The Facebook Live event is being held as part of our We Can Do It campaign, which, as you all know, we launched earlier this year. And with all of the work that we're doing, we're committed to doing all we can to defeat this virus through promoting mass vaccination and also rebuilding our healthcare infrastructure so that America is never again left so vulnerable. I'm also excited to be able to hear and share stories of so many of our members who have had the opportunity to get vaccinated. Just this weekend, I was in Oakland, where over the course of 4 days at a church in our community, we were able to vaccinate over 2,100 home care workers, nursing home workers, church members, and community members. And I know that in Los Angeles County recently, we also had a terrific partnership with St. John's, where we hope to vaccinate 60,000 community members a week. We also recognize and understand that this virus has taken far too many people, right? Nearly 60,000 of our family members, our loved ones, our sisters, our brothers. And that's why we're doing this work. Number one, that our members are able to work safely. And also caregivers have been on the front line, right? You all have been caring for our most vulnerable. And it's incredibly important that we do all we can to ensure that every long-term care worker has access to the vaccine and that our loved ones and community members do as well. And I also understand that we're tired of this pandemic, right? We want to hug our loved ones. We want to share space with our family members and our union sisters and brothers. We want to march together again. A lot of those things that gave us joy and fulfillment as human beings, as union members, we want to be able to do again. And that's why we're working so hard on this issue of vaccination. That's why we know that we can do it, but we have to continue to put pressure on elected officials, work with the community, work with experts to ensure that we're able to be safe, be with our loved ones, our family and friends again. So let's get going, SEIU 2015. Why don't we go ahead and jump in? Sister Kim, how are you feeling about the rollout of the vaccine?
I am feeling great, Brother Arnulfo. Thanks for asking. Look, I am excited to be able to be part of this incredible work that our members and our staff team at SEIU 2015 have been doing, as part of this campaign, getting the vaccine directly to our communities, make sure everyone has access to it. And, what we've done already, right? The examples you gave about our partnership work that we did in Los Angeles and then in Oakland, it's about our commitment to making sure we're getting the vaccine out to the most impacted communities, geographical equity, establishing enough distribution centers so they can expand the scope and accessibility of this vaccine to our caregivers, essential workers, and our communities. And we got to urge employers and government agencies to organize, right, and get organized and facilitate the distribution in a way that instills confidence in the vaccine. And I would say, in addition to the work that we've already done and will continue to do in Los Angeles and in Oakland, I'm excited to say we also have some upcoming vaccination events we're working on in Ventura, San Bernardino, and Long Beach. And those are examples where we partner with local community allies, health care centers, and elected leaders to accomplish the goals of this campaign. We're still working out the details of some of those events, but we know that we'll be in Oxnard on April 19th. And look, for more information and make sure you're in on the upcoming vaccination events, please make sure you head to our COVID-19 vaccine page on SEIU2015.org for the latest updates and information. I'm also excited that we know our members are getting in the information and getting educated. You know, we had a recent poll last month, and the members that took that poll, 70% of them said that they're getting their vaccination information from their union, which is super exciting. And then since February, we've had a 40% increase in the number of members on our monthly teletown halls who responded that they now have gotten the vaccination. So really proud of the work our member leaders are doing to educate and support one another on this. And I'm also really looking forward to hearing from our members, like our beautiful sister Javetta, who can share with us their personal stories, right, and experiences, which make the difference in the vaccination hesitation that folks have and what helps give them confidence to get the vaccine.
That's great, Kim, and I totally agree. And, you know, we are a couple weeks away from the state of California really opening up access to this vaccine to millions of Californians in a way that has never been done before. But we want to make sure that the principles that SEIU 2015 has been working on apply when they roll out the vaccine. They have to bring access to the vaccine to our communities, right? We know that our folks still have challenges getting the vaccine. Some of you have shared difficulties around getting an appointment, having to navigate the different technological barriers around accessing the vaccine, having enough locations in our communities that are accessible. We don't want to have to drive an hour away all the way across town to a big stadium to access the vaccine, right? And then we also know that in communities, in particular the Black and Brown community across California, that has been the most impacted, it's really important that we take into account racial disparities as to how this vaccine is distributed, so that we know that these are some really, really big questions that need to get answered in preparation for a really, really large rollout across California in a couple of weeks. So that's why it's so important that each of you joining us, Kim and I and Dr. Fernandez and Ms. Javetta today on Facebook Live, that you are part of helping to make sure that we encourage support and that we're normalizing mass vaccination across California, that we're offering fact-based information, not just what we hear, but what we're hearing from experts about the facts on why it's important to get vaccinated, and then also making sure that we give voice, right? Supporting and prioritizing our communities, mostly poor communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by the virus, and that also that each of us are trusted voices that help to combat skepticism and reservations. I have those in my own family, right, in my own community, but the leaders, union members, right, have an incredibly important voice and being a key communicator to audience who have valid concerns, and recognizing that many of these concerns are also grounded in historical inequities that our communities have faced as it relates to healthcare, and that's also very real. And that also that we're doing all we can to foster and demand accountability and transparency from employers, from corporations, from the government. Each of those sectors can do more to ensure a fair distribution of the vaccine and allowing us to beat back this pandemic. So it's now my real pleasure, SEIU 2015 family and community, to welcome Dr. Alicia Fernandez, who's a professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, and a general internist at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. She is the founding director of UCSF Latinx Center of Excellence, an HRSA and UCSF funded initiative to increase academic diversity. Welcome, Dr. Fernandez. We're so appreciative to have someone like you joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here and very appreciative of everything SEIU does and everything, most importantly, everything all your members do to improve the health of Californians. I am ready.
We're ready for you.
Okay.
And before you start, Alicia, just to let folks know, Remember, you got the chat box for a reason. We've got this beautiful woman here who's going to share her knowledge and here to answer your questions. So please make sure we'll be monitoring the chat to get your questions in. Take it away, Alicia.
Thank you. So first, I want to say that what I prepared some slides. They'll take us about 10 minutes. And then after that, I can answer all the questions you want. I also know that this talk is being interpreted, and I do a lot of work via interpretation with my own patients. And I know that sometimes it can be hard to understand things, even with good interpretation. So please, I want to hear everyone's questions, and I want to answer everyone's questions in any language. All right, why don't we start with the basics? Next slide, please. So you probably all know that 3 vaccines have now been approved in the United States, and 2 of them are very similar, the Moderna and Pfizer, and one, known as Johnson & Johnson, is a little bit different. What's important to note is that all 3 are highly effective in preventing hospitalization and death from COVID-19. The first 2 vaccines, the first one that was approved was the Pfizer vaccine. With that vaccine, you get a shot, you wait 21 days, and then you get a second shot. This vaccine needs very, very deep refrigeration, very, very cold storage, and is usually only available close to a hospital center. The Moderna vaccine is a vaccine where you get 1 shot, then you wait 28 days, and then you get the second shot. And this vaccine can be managed with regular refrigeration, so it's more widely available. Let me explain how these 2 vaccines work. On the left, you'll see the coronavirus. That is that yellow circle with the red spikes that give the virus its name, corona, like the sun. What the scientists did is, if you look at the squiggly lines inside the virus, that represents the virus's genetic material. What the scientists did is that they took out one little part of the genetic material, the little part in red, and that is the vaccine. And it is the little part of the genetic material wrapped up in a little layer of fat. That gets injected into the arm, and those little droplets go into the arm, and that little genetic information starts making the spikes. And then those spikes go onto that muscle cell, and in that way they teach the body to recognize the spikes of the coronavirus so that the body can be ready to fight it. What's important for me to explain here is, one, that the vaccine doesn't contain the virus. The vaccine can't give you coronavirus because there is no coronavirus inside the vaccine. There's only a little piece of the genetic information. Second, genetic information stays separate from the genetic information of the human, which is in this little circle here, and they never match. And the genetic information of the virus degrades, disappears after 2 days. Next slide. Well, how well do these 2 vaccines work? I'm going to show you the data from the study that Pfizer did. They took 21,720 people and they gave them the real vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. And they took 21,728 people and they gave them a fake vaccine, which we call a placebo. That was just a shot of salt water. Then they looked and they saw how many people got COVID in the next 3 months. And among the people who got the real vaccine, only 8 people got COVID. But among the people who got the placebo, the fake vaccine, 162 people got COVID. If the vaccine had not worked, then we would have expected equal number of cases among both groups. But the vaccine worked really, really well. It prevented all but 8 of those cases. The data from Moderna is very similar and also done in about 35,000 people. The next slide. So what about side effects? Well, the first day, with the first shot, most people feel a little bit of arm soreness and redness, particularly the day after you've gotten the injection. And that arm soreness can be a little bit bothersome. People put ice on it or Tylenol, but that's about it. It's like the arm soreness you feel with any vaccine. But with the second shot, the body has already learned how to recognize the coronavirus. And so it is much more common to get side effects. And some people complain of feeling tired on the next day or having a headache. And about 10 to 15% of people complain of fever. Put another way, for most people, the symptoms were not at all a big deal. They were able to go to work the next day. But about 30% of people didn't feel well enough to work the next day and had to rest. By the day after that, almost everyone is fine. You may have read or heard about allergic reactions. For every million shots given with these vaccines, there are between 4 and 5 people who get a severe allergic reaction, which requires treatment at the vaccine site. So 5 out of a million is not very much. It's like winning the bad luck vaccine category. Most of these reactions have happened in women, and they've all happened right away within 15 to 20 minutes of people getting the shot, which is why we ask people to wait in the area for 15 minutes. Next slide. Okay, let's switch now to talking about the new vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. You may have heard about this vaccine because it's a one and done vaccine. With this vaccine, it's one shot only. And this vaccine can be stored in regular refrigeration. It works a little bit differently, but also with a mechanism that's been worked out. People take a virus that causes the common cold and they kill that, they inactivate that virus. And inside that common cold virus, next slide, please. Sorry, I thought I had a picture there. Inside that common cold virus, they put in a little piece of that protein that causes the spike, and that's how that works. We know a lot about Johnson & Johnson safety as well. There was a trial in 8 countries with 43,000 people. And even though it's only one shot, it has more or less the same amount of side effects with that first and only shot as with the second shot of the mRNA vaccines, including headache, fatigue, and fever in about 10%. Allergic responses, severe allergies have also been reported, also quite rarely, to this vaccine. Next slide. So how well does it work? Well, in the US, it worked pretty well, quite well. It was over 90% efficacious. It worked to prevent over 90% of deaths and severe COVID-19. It worked a little bit less well in preventing moderate cases of COVID, but still quite high efficacy in the 70th percentile. What's nice about J&J is that because it was tested more recently, we know that it works against the new variants. And that's why it's part of the reason that we think that that it is a very useful vaccine. We know that it works. Next slide. So sometimes people say, well, which vaccine should I get? It's hard to compare which vaccine is better because the vaccines were done at different times. The studies were done at different times. When Pfizer vaccine and Moderna were done, there weren't so many new variants. When Johnson & Johnson was done, there were more new variants. So it's hard to compare, or is one of them stronger or better than the other? What we tend to think of as doctors is that any vaccine is best. Any vaccine you get will be will work really well at preventing severe cases of COVID and death from COVID. For some people, it may be easier. They may want to choose the one and done from Johnson & Johnson. Other people want to do, feel like they want to do the Moderna or the Pfizer. But in general, most of us having had the opportunity to choose, it's just really what's being offered at the time. Next slide. All right, so what do we know? We know that the COVID vaccine works really well among people who are older, over 65, as well as younger. All of these vaccines work well in both men and women. They've all been tested in people from 16 years old and up, so we know they also work in young adults. They've been tested in very diverse patient populations with a large number of African Americans and Latinos, and they work equally well in all races and ethnicities. They also work well among people who are obese, who have high blood pressure, who have diabetes, and even among people who have HIV. We also know that they have side effects and that it's usually 1 to 2 days of not feeling so well for a small group of people. We also know, this slide is now several weeks old, and we've vaccinated 60 million people. We're inching up on 100 million people vaccinated in the United States with no deaths attributed to the vaccine. Next slide. Since the clinical trials, we've learned some more things. In studies of vaccinated healthcare workers, we've found out that the vaccines are actually excellent at preventing infection without symptoms. We didn't know that when the data first came out. And then we also know now that vaccinated people are very unlikely to transmit the infection to others. That is really good news. It means that if you've chosen to be vaccinated, not only are you protecting yourself, but you're also protecting your family and your own patients. We also know that many pregnant women have chosen to be vaccinated and have had no problems. And the Association of Doctors who Work on Pregnancy, ACOG, are saying that the vaccine is okay to use during pregnancy and breastfeeding, even though those women were not included in the original trials, which is the norm in the US. Next slide. What we still don't know is what about children? Just last week, Pfizer announced that the vaccine works very well. They tested the 12 to 15-year-olds. Moderna has a trial that I think goes down to 9-year-olds, and we'll have those results by September. But we really don't have yet the data on children younger than 12. We also don't know what everyone wants to know is how long will the protection last? Will it only last 1 year or 2 years? Will we need to have booster shots if the coronavirus continues to change and mutate and new variants come out? Next slide. So when people think about the decision on the vaccine, I recommend that people think about it in this way. Next. On one hand, you should think about the vaccine and its side effects. And I understand that people can be nervous about the side effects about the vaccine. That makes a lot of sense to me. But know that there have been so far in the US no deaths related to that. On the other side, you have to think about the risk of getting COVID-19. And for some people, as you well know, COVID-19 is not at all dangerous. They have almost no symptoms, they have no symptoms, or very few symptoms. On the other hand, as everyone also knows, there's been over 530,000 deaths from COVID-19 in the US alone. So these are the two things to be balancing. Don't just think about, oh, am I scared of the vaccine, yes or no? Think about, am I scared of the vaccine, yes or no? And am I scared of COVID, yes or no? Next slide. What is not going to change for right now is needing to continue to take precautions. I think that the mask, as more and more people get vaccinated, there'll be less and less coronavirus circulating. And as there's less coronavirus circulating, we're going to be able to take off our masks and fully reopen our economy. But for now, until we achieve a larger proportion of people immunized, vaccinated in the state, we're going to keep using the mask. And that's probably going to be at least 4 or 5 months or more. Next slide. So if that's true, then what's the point of being vaccinated? Well, let me tell you some of the things that I've been able to do as someone who is vaccinated. It's okay to have a meal. I've had people over who also they themselves have been vaccinated. I've had a small group over for dinner in my apartment. That's been great to actually get to see people. And if you're vaccinated, it's okay to get together with low-risk people if they're unvaccinated. And what I call this is the grandparents' reward. Grandparents can see if grandparents are vaccinated, they can get together with their grandkids, and that is really as you all know, that is an extraordinarily important thing. It's also what has also changed for me personally, as I was saying, is fear of bringing the virus home to my family. Just this slide is out of date because just 2 days ago, the CDC, while it's still recommending against travel, is saying that people who are vaccinated can travel, and that's really good news. Next slide. This is me on a Saturday morning getting vaccinated at work. I got vaccinated, and the next day I saw that was my first shot. When I got my second shot, so the first shot I only had a sore arm, no big deal. With my second shot, I got that on a Wednesday night. I went on Thursday to work. I saw patients in the morning. I also was seeing patients in the afternoon, but by the afternoon I was feeling tired and grumpy because I felt like I just didn't feel right. I went home, I had dinner, and I went straight to sleep. By the next morning, I was fine. Some of my colleagues had no symptoms, and then I have some of my colleagues who had actually fever and had to stay home for 2 days because they were feeling so sick. That's about the range of normal. Next slide. I think everyone knows this, but it's important to point out that the vaccines are free and you don't need to have insurance. So if you are getting your vaccine, then, for example, at a Walgreens or someplace else, somebody may say to you, what insurance do you have? And the reason they're doing that is in order to bill your insurance for giving the vaccine, but not actually but vaccines are free to all of us, and it's fine to just say, I don't have insurance. You can still get the vaccine. Next slide. It's also important for me to say, as an immigrant myself, and as someone who takes care of lots of immigrants, that the vaccines are for everyone. No one is allowed to ask questions about documentation status in California, and in California, it is illegal to share any information from any vaccination site with ICE. Next. And I think people are familiar with MyTurn. That is the website where you can sign up if you're comfortable using internet. You can sign up. Using MyTurn. And if you're not comfortable, many counties have established a phone number where you can call to get the vaccine. So with that, let me stop the slides and let's go for your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez, and what an incredible presentation. Thank you for that wealth of information, and really also happy to see that photo of you getting vaccinated. You're helping to keep our community safe. So we really appreciate you joining us. A couple questions. One, we had a question from Shu Yen Chen. Are you able to combine the traditional flu shot with the COVID vaccine during the same period?
Great question. We recommend not to have them too close to one another, and that you should separate them by at least 2 weeks. And then, just so that you know, in California, the flu season was declared officially over last week. So we're no longer using flu shots. So if you haven't gotten your COVID vaccine, you should just get the COVID vaccine separate from any other vaccine. So that way we know, we have a better understanding and the body doesn't get confused.
Great. Thank you, doctor. We have another question from Christina Bailey. Will the vaccines protect against the B117 variant, or do we know yet?
Great question. So this is a variant that originated was first identified in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, where it has been horrendous because it is more contagious, more infectious, and it also seems to cause more severe disease. And this variant is now circulating in Michigan, where it's doing a lot of damage, and in lots of parts of the East Coast. It's also in California. But here's the good news and the answer to your question. Yes, they do protect you. They do protect you. All of these are protective against the B117 variant. So that is the good news. And another good reason to get vaccinated right away is because we're worried about the variants that might come along.
Great, thank you, doctor. And then I have one last question. I think my sister Kim has a couple as well that she's heard from folks about. Elizabeth Rada put in the chat her question, what kinds of vaccines are currently available? And I took that also to mean, how do you know which one you can access at any given time?
Great. So far, when the supply has been more limited, you kind of got what you got. So for example, at my hospital, the first week we had Pfizer, and it wasn't my turn because the first week it was the ER nurses and doctors. I was in the second week of people who got hospitalized. Second week we got Moderna, so I ended up with Moderna. But now people in California, you can, if you know that you have an appointment at a particular place, you can call and say what vaccine will be there. Same if you're getting at one of the mass vaccination sites or through your doctor or through a pharmacy, you can call and ask, which vaccine do you have?
Great, thank you, Dr. Sister Kim, what are you seeing or hearing?
I got a couple, there's a couple of, well, they're more comments, some in the form of a question, but there seems to be some chatter about whether or not the vaccines are FDA approved. And that might be something that hesitates people from getting the vaccine.
Yes, I'm so glad that somebody brought that up, because people hear, oh, they're not really approved. They're only approved under emergency use authorization. And so how do we know that they're really safe? And I totally understand that. So let me just talk a little bit about what that means. And also similarly, people always ask me, excuse me, how are they able to make it so fast? Apologies. So people always ask, how are they able to make it so fast? And, you know, didn't they cut some corners? So let me explain the story of how they made it so fast and also get to the story about the FDA. The reason that this vaccine was made so fast, especially Moderna and Pfizer, is because we got really lucky. People had been working on a vaccine for another coronavirus. Some of you may be old enough to remember SARS. SARS was another disease that was first identified in China and spread to different parts of the world, especially Canada. SARS was also caused by a coronavirus. Scientists were working for 10 years on creating a vaccine for SARS, and they had almost finished when along came the SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. So that's what made it so lucky, so easy to switch from protecting against one coronavirus to another coronavirus. So that helped a lot. The second thing that helped was massive investments in which the companies were told, go ahead and produce the vaccine, and even if it doesn't work, we will pay you. And that made the companies ramp up production. But what didn't change was the science. The testing of the vaccine was done in the exact same way as every single other vaccine in the US. And in fact, there's been more transparency than in most times. The companies were required to release all of their data, not just to the FDA, but to any scientist, so we can all look on their data on the web. So, excuse me.
We've been having you say a lot, so take your time with your water.
So what is an emergency use authorization? Why didn't the FDA approve it? Well, they approved it, but it's called approval under emergency use because they cut short a lot of the forms and the bureaucracy that a company has to show in order to protect its patent. And what they said is, we're going to protect your patent. We just want to get it out there. And that's why it's approved. So I hope that answers your question. I totally understand people saying, I don't get it. It's very fast. Is it safe? You know, I totally understand that. But what people need to know is that this is not the first week that we're offering the vaccines. We've had them now. Over 100 million people have gotten vaccinated. We know a lot about them.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Vest. I got one more, which is if I have COVID, if I've tested positive, can I still, and should I still get the vaccine?
Yes, if you had COVID, you should still get the vaccine. And the reason is, and I was surprised at this, I thought it would be the other way around. I thought natural immunity would be better than immunity given by the vaccine. But it turns out to be the other way around. Natural immunity starts to fade after 3 months, and the immunity from the vaccine seems to last longer. So we're telling people, go ahead, wait about 3 months, and then go ahead and get vaccinated. That way you'll be protected against other variants, and it will work better for you. So please go ahead and get vaccinated, even if you had COVID. You may have more side effects with the first shot than other people because your body will already recognize the coronavirus's spikes, but it won't be a big deal. I see a question about, can you get COVID even if you got the vaccine? And the answer is yes. Remember how I showed you that 8 people got COVID in the vaccine group, right? And so the vaccine is not 100%. It's in the 90s. That means you can still get COVID. And that's another good reason to continue to use the mask until COVID goes away.
Great.
I see someone also put into the chat in Spanish, and hola Vilma Reina, gracias por su pregunta, that she wants to know if her mother can get vaccinated if she's 103 and where she can get her appointment. Yes, you should definitely call get your mother vaccinated in that age group. And where you can get the appointment varies county by county. So either your union rep will know, or you can look at it at the county page.
Yeah, and just for also, there's some questions. If we're getting the COVID vaccine, do we need to be tested first?
No, you don't. You don't. You can just go and you get the vaccine, and you don't need an antibody test to see whether you've had a past infection because it's safe for people who've already been infected, and you don't need to be tested. Of course, if you're feeling sick, you should be tested.
Yeah. Well, this has been really helpful, and we thank you for joining us. If you want to stick around, you are happy to stay tight if we have other questions, because we want to hear now. We often have the best sort of educators are the caregivers themselves, and folks who have an experience to share. And so I really am excited that we have with us Javetta Gregory, who I've gotten to know over the last 6 years. She's an amazing caregiver, home care worker, community activist, and she's also a board member of our union. And Javetta, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on and sort of share with folks like your experience with the vaccine and your journey around it. So I want to turn it over to you to sort of share your story with folks.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you. And thank you everyone for having me. I'm excited to share my experience with the vaccine. I'm a caregiver for my brother, and I was initially hesitant about getting the vaccine because I rely on natural things like ginger root, elderberry. I just got done drinking some of that. I'm still drinking it, and I wanted to make sure that my brother and I were both protected from the virus. We had went to a drive-through. And so I really liked it that we didn't have to get out of the car, and I didn't cry. I'm afraid of needles, but like they said, your shoulder's a little sore. That next day, well, that day, the same day, and the next day, my shoulder was a little sore. But other than that, I haven't had any issues. But after learning more and seeing the trust in the virus, I gathered, my courage. I built up my courage to get vaccinated. Now I've been vaccinated. I have my second shot on the 17th, but my side effects, like I said, the sore shoulder, and I think it was well worth it for my safety and my family's safety and other people that I'm around. My lifestyle hasn't changed much. I'm still very careful, and I'm sure not to put myself in risky situations, but I feel more confident and less anxiety about my day-to-day activities. I've planned a trip in December, and I'm excited to be able to get out of the country, and I'll be fully protected at that time. So thank you so much for having me, and I strongly encourage everyone to go ahead and get your vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Javetta. It's so important, right? Because the concerns we have are real, like from the concerns we have about what we don't know about the virus and the vaccine to being afraid of needles is real. That's a real thing, sister. Like I am one. Yeah, I'm with you on that. So it is good to go through and take a minute, process, get educated, think about, weigh the options, as Dr. Fernandez said, so you could come to a decision you feel really good about, which sounds like when you made that decision, you felt confident that you were making the right one for you and your brother.
Right. And so then I'm continuing to keep my immune system built up with the ginger root and the elderberry. And I strongly suggest you guys do the same.
Yeah, you do. You keep doing your a la natural healthy stuff too, because that's probably working for you as well. So thanks, Javetta, for sharing that. And I feel like Javetta put a perfect period behind this education we've been doing in the last 45 minutes. So Arnulfo, what's next? What can we do next besides, what we talked about in terms of continuing to have our efforts to organize elected leaders, partner with our community folks to, sort of have these vaccination sites in our neighborhoods, in our communities of color. What else can we be doing as caregivers, as, neighbors, friends, and family around the We Can Do It campaign?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And it was really great to hear you interact with Ms. Javetta. For those of you who have not met her brother, he's an amazing human being. And the fact that she was able to get vaccinated with her brother, and between the vaccination and her natural things, there's nothing that's going to get her way. So it's really beautiful to hear that. And then just before this, I wanted to say, I did see Margaret Johnson. She said she had gotten her first shot as part of the SEIU FEMA event. Miss Margaret, we want to make sure that you get your second shot. I'd like to ask the moderator, please put the Member Action Center phone number for the union in the comment chat, please, if you have a question on how to access your vaccine. And then we'll do our best to also follow up with you, Mrs. Johnson. And then also Janice Kendrick had a question on being an IHSS provider caring for her child. How could other family members in her immediate family get vaccinated again? We're a couple weeks away from a much broader opening. Thank you, Janice, for that question. Also, we encourage you to call the Member Action Center so that we can make sure that your questions are answered. And Kim, as we think about where we go from here, right? There's a couple of key things that we can do to be part of making our We Can Do It campaign a success. And the whole point is making sure that we beat back how deadly this virus has impacted our community. We got to make sure that the vaccine is a priority in our policy plans, both locally and also as we push nationally. And then we also need to prioritize resources for the vaccine in our local and state budgets and put together plans that are going to put a focus in the months leading up to the June state budget process, that the vaccine rollout in California, where they're expecting to vaccinate millions, that it be equitable and that it be efficient, and most importantly, that it's coming into our communities. We also have to make sure that we're training workers across the state of California to meet the needs for the COVID vaccine and beyond, and that you can also take action right now. Each of you listening can take action. You can lift up your voice by filling out the We Can Do It pledge. That link will be put in the chat. It's SEIU2015.org/We Can Do It. That's going to connect you with ways to take an active role in prioritizing the vaccine, making sure that it's rolled out in the proper way. You can download the Facebook image, also share information that you learned and share about this Facebook Live event. Kim, is there anything else that you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've done an incredible amount of work, right, together as a union family and in our communities to make sure that that our federal government is playing a much robust role with the leadership of Joe Biden and his administration, getting enough vaccine here to us, but also through the stimulus plans, right? Like the stimulus legislation is really giving us the resources that we are going to continue to need, not just to meet this moment, but we also have to make sure that the jobs of caregivers are always like great jobs. They're protected, they're respected, they're paid for the value that they present to our communities and to our loved ones, and that we center care. And we got a lot of work to do on that. We've got to make sure that we have the infrastructure of long-term care that supports the dignity of that work and supports people to be cared for with dignity, our seniors and our adults and children with disabilities. And so what can we do, Arnulfo, on that front? What can folks here listening to this Facebook Live do to make sure that we are having our leadership in our federal government, do the right thing around not just the vaccination, but also long-term care?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And there's been some incredible, huge momentum coming out of the federal government, right? We know that there was a big presidential election. It really demonstrates each of you who have made calls, who you have taken action to ensure that what's coming out of Washington, D.C. is going to impact caregivers. So far, we've gotten an incredible response. On March 11th, President Joe Biden signed the American Rescue Plan into law. This is historic legislation that's intended to cut child poverty in half and also bring needed relief to families and to state and local governments. In addition, the bill also increases funding to IHSS program in California, over $1 billion for the next fiscal year, which is an incredible injection of resources into the IHSS program. Also on March 31st, President Biden unveiled his proposed infrastructure plan. Many of you know that is the American Jobs Plan. It invests in roads, bridges, green technology, water pipe infrastructure, and also the president included a proposal to invest in people. His proposal historically includes a $400 billion investment in caregiving, in particular in caregivers. So he has transformed the definition of infrastructure to also include the structure for caregiving, which has never been done by a president before. But now we have to make sure that this stuff gets passed. So these are huge steps forward. We have to stand together once again and demand that Congress pass the American Jobs Plan with $400 billion for caregivers. There's two key actions that each of you can take to help make sure that we get this victory. One, you can join the Care Can't Wait Summit this Saturday, April 10th at 9 a.m. for an online virtual event featuring caregivers, celebrities, and elected officials, all gathering to lift up the importance of valuing and investing in caregiving and caregivers. You can RSVP and you can find how to RSVP for this event in the comments below. The other action you can take is to call Congress. Let's not let Congress off the hook. We got to get this thing passed. Let's call Congress 1-800-719-0332. You can call them today. Let them know that it's time for them to pass the American Jobs Act. We need leadership, and that it includes the proposed $400 billion investment in caregivers. So we know that care can't wait. Our elected representatives have to recognize the relief that caregivers across California and the country need. And that also this ensures that we're able to protect the most vulnerable members of our society. So as we round the corner in this fight, we got to continue to ensure that policies are put in place to support the industries where our members were hardest hit and where they work. And I'm so excited about our work moving forward. Sister Kim, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you.
Yeah, so I am excited too, and I'm going to be on those phones, like I know you all will, calling Congress to make sure that we bring that investment down into where it is needed and to center it around caregivers and caregiving. And I want to make sure that you all appreciate the work that you do every day and the love and care and supports that you provide to our entire community here in California. Look, we've been on a journey. We've come a long way. We got some ways to go, but as our campaign slogan says, we can do it, sisters and brothers. So take care, be safe, and stay tuned for the next Facebook Live event coming your way. Good night, everybody.
All right.